Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of Life and Law, and tonight we have our special guest with us, Sara. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. And can you just give a little bio about yourself just for our listeners, just to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a single mom from York, PA. That's where my case is right now. We've been fighting the family court system in a custody case since 2018 and a grandparent case since 2021.
Okay. And so were both of those cases out of York County?
No, the first part was in Lebanon, PA.
Okay. And so can you just tell a little bit about sort of your experience and kind of what happened in your case?
Yeah, absolutely. My case started, like I said, in Lebanon County in 2018. Early on, I was granted a protection from abuse order for me and both children for no contact against my ex after a physical altercation happened at the very first custody exchange in that case. And then about 4 months into that, my ex filed contempt and we were taken to court, I want to say October 4th of that same year, where the judge basically told me. So my ex filed contempt and we ended up in court, I want to say October 4th of that same year, where the judge basically told me that technically I was in contempt, so I could either agree to go back to the custody order that was in place prior, or I could go to jail that day. And after I agreed to revert back to the custody order that was in place, he let me know that if I would withhold the children again, that I would be arrested on a bench warrant. And later that did happen. My ex abused the children again, I want to say within the next couple of weeks. And I was actually arrested out of an emergency domestic violence shelter in Lebanon, PA. The judge knew we were there.
So can you tell a little bit more about that, just sort of how you were arrested at a DV shelter and what that experience was like?
Yeah, so there was an incident that I can't remember the specific like injuries or anything like that, but my kids were clearly hurt and I had called the cops to the DV shelter to report that and talk to them about that. The one officer basically told me that, like, I'm a father myself and I can't tell you what to do in a situation like this because there are court orders, but I know as a father what I would do in this situation, which was obviously not to send the children back into this situation. So I withheld the kids again, and the judge stayed true to his word and issued that bench warrant, and they came out and arrested me out of the shelter. And I spent 24 hours in the Lebanon County Jail for that.
Like, how did they even know you were at the shelter? Because I thought they're supposed to be confidential.
They are. I believe that it was said in court prior to that. Like I said, the judge did know that I was there when he issued the bench warrant, so he knew exactly where to find me.
And did you feel like they were just like treating you differently than the other party in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a heavy, heavy bias towards my ex, even when it was actually the same judge who granted the PFA who we had in our custody case. So he knew the exact situation and why that was in place to begin with. But as soon as my ex decided, like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, let's just go back to custody instead of, the protection order that I don't want against me, the judge was like, okay, yeah, let's do that.
And what's the name of this judge, if you can say it?
Judge Klein.
Judge Klein?
Yeah, he actually retired just after our case moved.
How convenient.
Right?
And then, so what happened after that, after you were arrested at the DV shelter? Like, what happened from there?
So custody was switched to my ex. He ended up with primary custody on a temporary order, and I was placed on supervised custody until the custody trial, which was a couple of weeks later. And at the custody trial, it was basically the same thing. My ex wanted primary custody, so the judge said, you can either agree to this arrangement or this is what I'm going to put in the order anyway, which I realize is something that judges do when they want to make a decision that's unlawful or likely to be reversed on appeal. They'll make you feel like you don't have a choice. Like, this is what the order is going to be anyway, so just agree to it, right?
So you agreed, but you felt like you were coerced into doing that.
Absolutely. I didn't feel like I had any choice.
And then after that, did you ever try to reverse the orders or modify?
Not at that point. I didn't understand at that point that we could appeal and things like that. This was a learning experience for me. So it wasn't until 2021 my ex was charged for violent sexual offenses against a 14-year-old girl. And at that point, I did file for modification. I was not allowed to modify the orders at that point until he was physically in prison, wasn't how it ended up going.
And was this girl that he assaulted somebody that he knew?
No, I believe they met on an app that was called like Secret or something like that, but she was a runaway. They started talking and he lured her into his home. So she was actually living there for a couple of months. And eventually she realized that, this was not a safe person to be with, and she tried to end the situation, and that's where things got violent and non-consensual. And I mean, obviously the consensual part was not okay either, but it turned into a whole other thing.
Wow. And so he's currently still in prison at right now?
Yes, he was sentenced to 4.5 to 10 years. So his first possible release would be in February of this year or of this next year.
And so did the court reverse custody at all or take into consideration the fact that him being in prison is not in the children's best interest, or did they act like it wasn't a factor?
No, that was actually taken seriously at that point. Like I said, I wasn't allowed to modify until he was physically in prison, but at that point, then he actually agreed to sole custody. So I walked out of Lebanon County with sole custody. However, the judge, or actually, let me back up a moment. So 2 days after my ex's sentencing, his dad filed a petition to intervene for visitation. So even though we had this agreement for sole custody, the case was kicked down to York County, where I lived, with the grandparent case pending.
So basically, they combined the cases because the grandparent case was also pending?
Right. The custody case should have closed when I got sole custody because there weren't any rights left to, enforce or modify at that point. But because grandfather filed an intervention into the case, they left it open and left it pending for him.
And then what happened once the grandfather did that? How did those proceedings play out?
It was again very heavily biased towards him. We had our first hearing in front of the new judge in York County for our pretrial conference, and his attitude was basically, you can settle for exactly what grandfather wants, or he's going to get it anyway. Like, there's no chance that I'm not going to give him rights. So you need to, if you want to have an agreement that's going to be something you're happy with, you need to settle on this. So it's basically the same kind of coercion that I walked into in the first trial.
But what was he asking for? Was he asking for custody, or was he asking for just visitation?
At first, it was just visitation. I believe he was asking for, I think, like 2 days, maybe like 2 Saturdays a month, something like that, some holiday time, some time over the summer, things like that.
And then he later asked for custody?
Well, it was because of the judge's demeanor towards me that things kept increasing. So we went to the trial. I refused to settle. That was one thing that I learned from the our first custody trial. Do not settle. So I was going to preserve my right to appeal no matter what this judge did. That was the only thing that I knew at that point. So when we ended the trial, the judge concluded with saying basically, well, you're going to do more to encourage a good relationship between grandfather and these children, or I'm going to do it and I'll just grant him more and more and more time until you get the message. Is that clear? So when he came at me like that, then grandfather, his demeanor changed and he was like, okay, well, I want more and more and more. So from that trial, the judge ended up scheduling a review hearing 3 months out, which I've learned is one of his patterns. He does it in all of his cases, dragging everybody back every chance he gets. But in our first review hearing, I challenged his jurisdiction. I said, I believe there's been an error of law. I don't think the grandfather has standing, so I don't believe that you have subject matter jurisdiction because I have sole custody and the law requires that there's a disagreement between the parents. But with sole custody, we don't have that disagreement technically.
And so what did the court say to that?
He switched from scheduling review hearings to telling grandfather, like his demeanor changed instantly. He got extremely hostile with me. And he told grandfather that you can start filing contempts against her if you believe that she hasn't been following the order.
And did you try to file a disqualification on that judge at any time?
Yes, between myself and a court appointing counsel that I later had for contempt hearings, we had filed, I want to say 6 times between the two of us to recuse or disqualify him.
And this judge, what was his name?
Judge Mangus out of York County.
And he refused to recuse himself.
No, each time he would say, I can follow the law and I don't believe that I'm biased, so I'm not going to recuse myself.
And then he would just continue retaliating and being more biased.
Yep, it got more and more hostile as we went.
Did you ever try to file a judicial complaint with him, against him?
Yes, there was one for my case that was just thrown out, but he's been reported many, many, many times, and it so far hasn't gone anywhere.
And then, so do you feel like your ex and his father were basically abusing the grandparent visitation, custody ability to file for that? Do you think they were doing that to continue to abuse you legally?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the whole point, I think, was so that my ex could have some avenue to maintain control, even though he's a person who obviously shouldn't be having any contact or custody with children. But I've learned that this is not an uncommon workaround when abusers end up in the situation where they can't legally maintain and control themselves. The courts will allow them to like basically tag in a third party to do it for them.
And did the grandfather have an attorney?
Yes, they actually share an attorney, father and grandfather.
And so do you think that maybe the attorney is bribing the judge or doing something corrupt in order to get such like clearly biased treatment in favor of the clients?
Unfortunately, I think it's just this judge. This is his normal demeanor. This is how he handles cases. He has many other third party cases that are just like this, and this judge just happens to be one that works often in his courtroom, so they have a relationship.
And so do you think that this judge is biased against mothers, or that he is like putting children towards abusers, or what do you think his pattern is?
It's both, actually. We have some men that are in our group of victims that we have brought together, but it's mostly mothers and it's mostly abuse victims. And his MO seems to be coming after the strong established women. Most of us are, successful career women that have been broken down through his cases, because he'll essentially put a target on her back, and until you're broke and just completely broken down, he will not stop.
And so right now, what is the current custody arrangement on paper?
Right now I have sole rights. I have sole physical and legal custody. The grandparent order was reversed on appeal.
And then how long was it in effect, the grandparent order?
About 3 years. The judge was trying to kind of avoid appealable orders. I was actually arrested for a second time for contempt on the same day that he entered our final order in an attempt to block that appeal.
And so, like, did you end up doing all of this pro se?
Most of it. I did have an attorney that he kind of straddled the Lebanon and York County cases. So he was the one that helped me transfer it from Lebanon to York County, since that's where I lived. And there was a point where he had tried to file a proposed parenting plan into the case, giving grandfather exactly what he wanted. So he was fired immediately for that. And I went or no, actually, there was one more attorney. I hired an attorney from a place called Trinity Law in York, PA. And I later learned that that is actually the judge's law firm. It was
Wow.
Mangus and McLaughlin prior to that. And this attorney did not disclose any of that to me. So I didn't realize until later why he refused to fight. But when I fired him, then I went pro se, and I've been pro se since then.
So you were able to get it reversed pro se, pretty much.
Right. Yep.
That's pretty good. And you were going against the attorneys on the other side?
Yeah. Yep. I had to go up against father and grandfather's attorney in the Superior Court, which was a very interesting experience, to say the least.
And did you do like an oral argument?
I did. My brief was because the way the judge was handling the case, he was holding me in contempt throughout the appeal process to, continue trying to back me down or at least prevent me from effectively litigating that part of the case. And so I requested oral arguments so that I could make sure that I expanded on the most important part, which was, to me, the malice from the judge. Because, he came into the pretrial and basically said, this is how it's going to go, and you can agree or else. And then I was arrested, I was put on probation. There was so much that was happening, and it was just an effort to prevent me from discussing the fact that he was acting completely without jurisdiction for that entire time.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like you say you were arrested, but it sounds like you were just like taken in on contempt. You weren't actually arrested on a criminal charge and you didn't go to criminal court, correct?
Right. It was just a civil contempt. It was supposed to be for coercive purposes,
Yeah,
but
so
he was
they're
misusing
basically,
it.
yeah, he's
Sorry.
abusing this. Yeah, no, it's fine. He's abusing the civil contempt procedure to try to criminalize something that should never be criminalized in the first place.
Absolutely. Yep.
And did you like encounter other parents who also were arrested in your county?
Oh yeah, there's many. This judge has actually told me in one of our recent hearings, he said, I'm proud of my reputation for holding parents in contempt and jailing them.
And do other parents try to make complaints?
Yeah, we actually have an attorney right now on a dependency case for a mother in our group, and he's offered to like rent us a room and come with us to sit down so all of us can put our evidence together and file a joint complaint where, he's going to also put his name on it.
Well, that's good. That sounds pretty promising.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope this works out.
So now you have sole custody again, and the grandparents have no rights.
Correct. The Superior Court determined that grandfather never had standing to file, so legally those orders never existed.
So when they were reversed, did they just issue an order that you could immediately retrieve your children, or how did it work?
Well, I still had custody of my kids. He just had like a visitation partial custody order. So they were in my care when the orders were reversed. So I
Okay.
simply stopped taking them for the visitation at that point.
And so now, how long has it been now with you having sole custody again?
The decision was entered on May 16th of this year. So it's been a couple of months.
Well, that's awesome. Well, congratulations on getting that done pro se. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
I mean, even some people like they hire lawyers and they spend all this money and they end up losing and getting nowhere. And did you study a lot, or how did you get yourself to be able to do that without like a background in legal?
There was a lot of spinning my wheels and just obsessively researching things because there was a big thing I think attorneys and judges do when you start figuring things out is that they'll play mind games, and even when you're like right on the money, they'll start treating you like you're stupid, things like that. So it took me a while to confidently understand what I was doing in that, but it was a lot of obsessively researching grandparents' rights, how that applies in relation to parental rights, things like that. And eventually I realized that what I needed to focus on was the custody statute for the state and the state and local rules of civil procedure. Like that's basically the court's playbook. And then there's some case law that determines how grandparents' rights are handled.
That's really good. And so, do you have any concerns that your ex might try to ask for visitation or more access once he gets out?
That's actually where we are right now. So after I won my appeal, they filed in the PA Supreme Court to challenge that. They didn't want to hear it. So the day after the Supreme Court denied their filing, they turned around and filed a custody modification petition for my ex requesting shared legal custody. And in the petition, it states that he wants that so that he can access the kids' confidential records, which a sex offender obviously should not have access to. That's a safety concern for us. And he specifically says that he wants to be able to basically overcome my refusal to allow grandfather to be involved. So he wants shared legal custody to create that disagreement between the parents that would allow his dad to have standing to step in.
Because the dad won't have standing unless there's a disagreement.
Right.
Which is kind of crazy because it just makes it like more of an incentive for there to be conflict.
Right. I think in every application, grandparent visitation statutes are unconstitutional because I think no matter what, you're going to be applying them against a fit parent. Like if you had an actual case against the parent that they're unfit or something like that, obviously you'd be seeking more than visitation as a third party, right?
But do they have the right to have visitation as long as it's not proven harmful, or how does the law say it in PA?
So Troxel v. Granville is the standard for grandparents' rights, first parental rights. And essentially it comes down to parents have the right to determine the care, custody, and control of their own children. And as long as they're a fit parent, there should be no unnecessary interference from the state. So these grandparent laws are supposed to be very, very limited in application. It would basically be, the child would be harmed, psychologically, mentally, emotionally by refusing this relationship, something like that. There has to be a showing that it would impact kids negatively. So if the visitation is negative, then that's not something that can be in place.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like a lot of times it's clear cut, like with Troxel v. Granville and some of these other cases where the state is trying to take away the children, or it's a third party who's trying to get custody. It's pretty straightforward when it's parents versus the state. But when it's parent versus parent and they both are the parents, then you're saying like a parent has the right for the care, custody, and control of their children. But if both of those parents have those rights, then which one gets the children? You know what I'm saying? So it's like there are no Supreme Court cases that are clear like that where it's parent versus parent. And a lot of times in federal court, those cases get dismissed because they try to say, oh no, this is just a domestic relations dispute. But in reality, it is the state who is issuing the orders, because if that judge is a state court judge and you sue him in federal court, they're going to say he has absolute immunity because he's equal to the state because he works for the state. So it is basically like the state removing children, but if they remove it from one parent to another, they can hide behind that and say, oh, well, the child is still in the care and control of the parent.
Yep, they play so many games when it comes to those laws and standards. Honestly, I don't think the laws themselves are written in a negative way. Like, I think if the judges were actually applying them properly and respecting the rights of parents, they would simply be stepping in to act as a tiebreaker unless there's, legitimate child safety issues. And then those laws kick in where, okay, now you have to protect the child, and that you no longer have two fit parents going against each other. You have one where the child needs protected from them. So their rights can be restricted in that situation. But unfortunately, in family court, as we know, usually if you allege abuse, you're the one that's going to have your rights restricted.
Right. Have you ever thought about doing like a termination of parental rights, or do you believe that having some limited access or contact with the children would somehow benefit them?
No, I definitely think there should be no contact. I'm afraid to file anything in front of the judge that we have now just because of his extreme bias towards both father and grandfather. So I don't want him to be the one making a decision on the termination of parental rights. But as it stands right now with Caden's law, my ex actually is statutorily barred from having custody because his lead charge is involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, which is one of the named charges in Caden's law. And the judge has also found him to be a threat of safety. And those 2 points together mean that unless he could come to the court and with clear and convincing evidence prove that he poses no risk at all to the children, he's not allowed to be granted anything.
Right. So even if he does get it granted, you can file an appeal, but then that can take a year, 2 years until a decision gets made. And then during that time, he'll still be able to access the children. Like, do they stay the orders while the appeal is pending if it's like a family order, or do they keep it in effect?
It totally depends. By the time I got the grandparent order up to the Superior Court, they were not willing to stay it because the procedural background was just so confusing that they couldn't tell what the status quo was supposed to be. But usually if you can prove what the status quo is and that you will be or will most likely be successful upon appeal, they will usually stay it. Or at least they should be staying it in those situations.
And so do you feel like that's probably what might happen now that he might get out soon?
I'm hoping so. This judge has a pattern of trying to prevent appeals. He doesn't like to enter final orders that can be appealed, so it creates a much more complicated process where you have to ask permission to appeal those orders. But I think if I could, once we get that order to challenge, I definitely think it could be easily reversed upon appeal and probably stayed during the process just because he's a violent offender and I can show that he shouldn't, or not that he shouldn't, but he cannot have these rights.
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that people like don't understand is like you have sole custody. It's supposed to be a final order, but here he is filing a motion to modify, and he can continue to do that every single year for the next till your kids turn 18 just to harass you. And so it's like these cases they're never over. There's never a final judgment. People think, "Oh, I have sole custody. Now I'm the sole custodian." Okay, but tomorrow you could have supervised visits again, like
Right.
it could just change at any moment. And that's the scary part. It's not like a regular case where at the end of the case, the person wins $1 million settlement and it's over. You can appeal it if you want, but that's it. There's no more going back, modifying it. Family cases are the only cases like that. And part of it is because by leaving the cases open indefinitely like this, they're able to continue billing the federal government through Title 4E to be able to get money to get reimbursed for basically the fact that you have a case alone lets them bill them. So like they want to make all these incentives to continue to keep them open. But did you ever have like a GAL or anything like that?
No, thankfully we never got drug into that. There was a point during the grandparent case where he had asked for one, but when he realized that he was going to be the one that ended up paying for it, he backed off of that very quickly.
And so there was no attorney for the minor children or anything. And what about like, were there therapists involved?
No, we actually never had any additional people brought into the case. We never had evaluators or anything like that either.
And so what about the possibility of getting another PFA, or do they allow them to be like lifetime in your state?
It depends. I think permanent is usually 1, 3, or 5 years, I think are the options. But right now, because there's no like physical abuse happening, I don't have any grounds to seek that. PA is very limited on what we have for protection orders.
That's just crazy because like every state has different laws, obviously, but like
Mm.
I know somebody from, I think, Idaho, and he said that in that state, all you have to do is show that you're afraid and you get a restraining order. You don't even need to show that there's actually any abuse or any risk of abuse. You just have to show that you're afraid. So
See, that's a little
anybody
bit
can just
crazy
say,
to
I'm
me.
afraid. Exactly. Like, and so, but then in yours, like, they don't allow you to get it for coercive control or emotional abuse or psychological abuse. Is it only physical?
I believe so. I would have to look into that, but I believe recently the laws have changed regarding coercive control in some states, so I'm not sure if PA was one of them, but it's definitely something worth looking into.
Yeah. Like in Connecticut, it supposedly changed back in 2021, but in reality, going in there and trying to say there's coercive control, even with proof, they won't give you a restraining order. Like they only use it when abusers go in there and try to get a restraining order saying their ex coercively controlled them and use that as an excuse to like steal their children and stuff like that. Like they don't actually use it for the purpose, even though they created a law called Jennifer's Law, named after two women who were murdered by their like husband. And in one of them, like the husband was never violent and never physical with her. but then he was very controlling and a lot of coercive control. And she continuously tried to go to the courts and ask for a restraining order, and they continuously denied it, saying there's no physical violence, there's no, you know, physical threat, therefore we're not going to give it to you. And then eventually she was murdered. So it's like somebody could go from never touching you to killing you in one day. And if the courts aren't looking at these patterns of behavior, that these coercive control is like the hallmark of abuse. If they're ignoring this, then they're just continuing to have blood on their hands.
Right. I absolutely agree. I will never understand. Well, I mean, to a point, I do. It's a lot because there's certain personality types that are attracted to those positions of power, which is why we have this, everything is illogical. It happens in the exact like opposite way that you would expect it should when you get to the court system.
Yeah. And so do you feel like there are some judges that are good, or do you feel like they're all corrupt?
I definitely think there are good judges. I think there are good lawyers, but the bad definitely outweigh the good in this system.
And do you see yourself ever getting a lawyer again, or do you think that you're better being pro se at this point?
Yeah, at this point, I think I'd rather just handle it by myself.
Do you feel like sometimes lawyers will not want to do what you want them to do, even though you're paying them and you're the client? Sometimes they will refuse to file certain things or try to do it their way and not listen.
Yeah, that was my whole experience. They didn't want to listen to me even once I did understand the laws. Like I had that court appointed lawyer. He didn't want to listen to me until I won the appeal. And then suddenly he was ready to acknowledge that, like, oh, yeah, you know what you're doing. But I had hired that lawyer from the judge's law firm. He pretended I sent him Troxel v. Granville, and he tried to pretend that he didn't understand what it was saying. He basically said, I don't want to waste too much of your retainer on this, so I'm not going to read any more of it. But here's these random cases from 1984 that I think actually apply here.
Which is funny because he definitely doesn't even need to read that case to know what the holding of it is. It's a famous
Right.
Supreme Court case that any lawyer would know. And so,
Absolutely.
and for him to play dumb and not tell you about the conflict of interest is another violation of their ethical professional standards. So these attorneys know what they're doing, and it's likely that maybe he just felt like, oh, there's no way that they're going to let you win, so he's just going to discourage you from doing the appeal and everything like that. But then once he saw you did win, all of a sudden now he wants to acknowledge it. So it's like they don't have the courage to do what you did. And even if a lot of them will charge crazy retainers and say, okay, yeah, pay me 50,000, 100,000 and I'll do it. But then they still don't fight as hard as you would, because no one's going to fight as hard as you will, because nobody knows your case as much as you do. And nobody cares as much as you do about your own kids. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they do it on purpose. There's so many situations where they're like, "Oh, this is such an easy win. If you just send me this money, I can get this done for you." And then all of a sudden it's, "Oh, well, we're stuck now. We can't do anything else." The judge has backed us into a corner. But it's as a pro se litigant, I know that that's very rarely the case. There's you like appeals are the first step to challenging things, but there's also, writ petitions that you can file in the higher courts if you're in extraordinary circumstances. There's almost always something that can be filed to challenge what's happening in the lower court if the trial judge doesn't want to follow the law.
yeah, and it's just kind of scary how like you can be in this position where you have all the rights and he has nothing, and you have the kids, you're able to keep them safe, but you still have this fear of what can happen in the future. It's like you're not secure even with a final order. So
Right.
are you planning to try to just do whatever you can possible to keep you and the kids safe and continue fighting kind of how you've been, and sort of just play it by ear and see how it goes?
Yeah, that's my whole strategy at this point. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to keep them safe. And with the legal battle, my ex is going for modification. The judge seems to be entertaining it at this point, even though I've challenged his jurisdiction. So I'm just going to play the game the same way. I'm going to build the record for the appeal, and I'm going to hold out until I get that order that I can send up there and hopefully have it reversed and actually have our freedom.
And so you don't even think that supervised visits would be safe?
No, absolutely not. He was having phone calls with the kids through grandfather's time, and they were affecting the kids so badly that they were spending a lot of time down in the school counselor's office, things like that, because it was impacting their ability just to live a normal life.
That's terrible. And have the kids gotten into therapy and stuff to try to cope with a lot of this trauma?
Yeah, we're actually looking for a new one right now. They were in school-based therapy, but we had moved after I won the appeal, so we're getting reestablished now there. But yeah, we're definitely looking to get them that kind of support.
And you mentioned having some groups in your community. Are you feeling like there's a lot of support out there from other parents and other moms who are maybe in similar situations with the court and that you can lean on for support?
Yeah, definitely. We've connected with dozens of parents locally. And then on my Facebook, we have a large group of parents that are going through family court. So overall there's a lot of support in this arena. I think a lot of people in the last couple of years are speaking out more, so it's much easier to find our people when we're going through this to lean on.
And does anybody court watch or go to each other's hearings sometimes?
Oh yeah, we do that. I had actually surprised the judge with some court watchers in a contempt hearing earlier on in the grandparent case. So I was blocked from Zoom watchers. But since then, there's a group of locals that comes to every one of my hearings. So I never have to be alone.
And what did they say about the Zoom? No more Zoom?
Yeah, I actually just posted the transcript on Facebook the other day, but the judge waited until I had left and he had logged Zoom out, and then he added to the order, okay, add a sentence. The court notes that mother had a bunch of observers on Zoom, and since we can't control the recording or taking pictures of the courtroom via Zoom, mother's allowed to have observers, but they must be in person moving forward.
That's such a joke. Like they're so worried about having witnesses to them doing fraud. And
Yep.
since when is it not allowed to record? Like, do they have transcripts there or how does it work? Like, is there always a court reporter in the courtroom?
Yes, we're not allowed to like audio or video record in PA. I believe it's in the law, but we do have court reporters in every hearing. But the issue is with a judge like this, I've never once gotten a transcript that actually matches the hearing, which is the real reason why he's, concerned about having people recording via Zoom if they wanted to take that risk themselves.
So do they have audio and PDF transcripts or only PDFs?
Only PDFs, which is, I've been backing State Rep Jamie Flick's efforts to get cameras in the courtroom in PA because that's one of the things that I think would have helped my case a lot. We need to force transparency without having those, audio recordings or video recordings or something of the hearing. The judge can easily have those transcripts manipulated, and then we have no way to prove what actually happened in our hearings. We can't prove his demeanor, all the things that would be important to prove in a disqualification or something like that.
Yeah, and like if they're able to produce the transcript, then they have the audio. Like all they're doing is listening to the audio and then typing it. So for them to only give you the opportunity to have the PDF but not the audio is suspicious. That's another thing. Like, why are they only offering you the transcript version? Like in Connecticut, they have both, but you have to pay for it. And so sometimes it can cost thousands of dollars. And then if you want it sooner, it's like $5 to $10 a page. And so like,
oh my gosh.
If you want to have an appeal, you have 20 calendar days to file an appeal and you need the transcript. So if you want the transcript expedited for the appeal, you need to pay for it to come like within the next few days, which is like 5 to 10 a page versus regular standard processing would be like 30 days, but then you only have 20 days for your appeal. So it's like the system is designed to make it so they make as much money as they can off of us, extort desperate parents for money, and then they just try to just keep you in the system as long as possible. It's just crazy. And I know in PA you guys had that Cash for Kids scandal. I've had a couple other PA people on the show. I don't know if you're familiar with Marianne Petrie that does Slam the Gavel.
Yep.
She's from PA too. So there's a lot going on, even like in the criminal courts, which it's just crazy how you dealt with probation and jail without ever going in criminal court.
Yep, I think we hold steady at number 5 most corrupt state in the US, and our court system definitely reflects that.
What's number one?
I'm honestly not sure off the top of my head. I've just paid attention to PA. Like, we are always in spot number 5.
Number one's probably Connecticut.
I definitely think it's up there. I've heard that from a lot of people that you guys have a pretty rough system too.
Yeah, I feel like it's these like northeastern, like Commonwealth states. Like they're just a lot of them are, really old and been around for a very long time, and they don't have oversight. That's the problem, is that these states don't have anybody overseeing what they're doing. And in federal court, they will say that they have the domestic relations abstention doctrine. And they'll say, okay, well, if this involves custody or child support or divorce or anything like that, even if your constitutional rights were violated, then we're still going to refuse to take jurisdiction because this has to do with children and custody and divorce. Therefore, the state has exclusive jurisdiction. So if they have exclusive jurisdiction and they have immunity, if they have judicial immunity as judges and absolute immunity for the GALs, the judges, the DCF, all those, it's like they can literally get away with anything and nobody holds them accountable. And that's kind of what's happening in every state in various ways.
Yep, they have us as victims pretty well isolated from being able to get any real relief. I mean, unless you can either win your appeal or qualify for a writ petition or something that would have the state Supreme Court step in, you're kind of on your own, and there's not really much that you can do. Nobody wants to step into these cases. There's so much of like, oh no, you're just being emotional because you lost. Just deal with it.
Exactly. Even though you literally got the case overturned and proved that you were right the whole time.
Yep.
It's not even like, oh, win or lose, like this person was a fair winner or a fair loser. Like it's completely botched. They're just doing whatever they want. Like each case is totally different. Like you could have another case where the father's in jail for a sex crime and he gets no custody, no contact ever again. But in your case, somehow they're even entertaining it. Like
right. Like I've challenged jurisdiction, venue in my preliminary objections, and the only thing that the judge is willing to hear is the venue issue. So right now we have a so-called joint jurisdictional hearing scheduled with a judge in Lancaster County, which is where my case should be if there was a valid modification petition. But that's his business partner. So we're now having a joint hearing with the judge and his business partner to determine who wants my case.
And have you tried filing a disqualification based on those conflicts and try to get a different judge?
Not yet. I actually can't file anything in Lancaster County because it's happening completely off the record in their county. So this joint jurisdictional hearing is a completely made up procedure that this judge is doing right now to keep me in court.
And so where is it supposed to take place? In the Lancaster court?
No, it's in the York County court, and I guess his business partner, the visiting judge, would be appearing via Zoom, I think.
And the other side's attorney and everything is preparing to go to this?
He was actually the one that proposed it. So when I filed my preliminary objections, and I had to file them a couple of times to get it done properly. So the time I knew I got it done correctly when opposing counsel emailed Chambers and said, hey, since Mother's disputing venue, why don't we have a joint jurisdictional hearing?
And so you were able to object to that via email or filed something?
Yeah. Yep. I sent an email back and said that I objected to that. That's not a real procedure under PA law. Obviously, this case needs to be dismissed, but if we're going to discuss venue, Lancaster County would be the proper venue.
And so you're planning to attend, even though you're disputing the legitimacy of it, just so that you don't get defaulted on something?
I'm appearing just because I'm afraid that if I don't, that there's going to be, like a bench warrant, a bolo, something like this judge. I don't
Yeah.
know what to expect from him if I tried to simply opt out of the procedure. But I am trying to rally as much of the community as I can to appear in hopefully both courts so that these judges know, like, you've got eyes on you.
Yeah. And maybe even like consider writing to the board of parole or whoever it would be that would possibly release him early, because perhaps if you explain to them the severity of the situation and say how, you guys are fearing for what he might do if he regains access to the children, that maybe they might like consider.
Yeah, I did write a letter that let them know that he's still abusing us through the system, and I think that his chances of reoffending are very high, I believe, especially because he's spent the entire time in prison trying to abuse me through the court system, to weaponize that court system against us. And if they do let him out, I requested that there is a no contact order put in place between him and I so that he can't contact me and he can't have any third party contact me on his behalf.
And would that extend to the children as well? Or do you think that they're more likely to say, oh, well, he has rights, so we're not going to protect the kids?
Yeah, I did put that in the request also to have no contact with all three of us, but I'm not sure if that would be something that's realistic for them to do or if it would kind of come down to, oh, well, there's a custody case, so we can't overstep that. I'm not really sure how that works, honestly.
And are there any resources in PA for like victims of domestic violence other than the DV shelters? Are there nonprofits or other organizations that can offer assistance? Because it seems like your situation is more high risk and there's so much documentation. So have you tried looking for any of these resources out there if they
I
exist?
haven't, yeah, I haven't recently just because my experiences in the beginning were, each time reaching out to a place like that, they usually can't offer much help. Once there's a custody case in place, people can't really help much with the orders. If you have a biased judge, you're just kind of stuck there. But the ones that did help the most was the YWCA. And we have those, usually they have an office in the courthouse that you can go to. They'll help you file the PFA, give you an advocate for support, things like that. So they can give you some moral support through it.
And so maybe they might be able to help sort of navigating this process as it gets closer and you have these upcoming proceedings. Maybe having that DV support might help.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not sure if they're allowed to attend anything other than the actual like PFA hearings, but I definitely think it's something worth looking into. But
Yeah.
either way, I think there's going to be a decent amount of community support once we get to this hearing.
Yeah. I think that's the key because, like you said, they don't want witnesses and they don't want people to see the corruption. So the more that they see that you have the support of the community and that people are paying attention and people care, then they're less likely to do their crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. The judge's demeanor changes every time I have witnesses there.
And so are any of the judges women? It sounds like a lot of them are male.
No, all well, the two that I've had and then the third one that I'm likely to get, they're all males. The only time I've been in front of a female judge was when I first moved to Lancaster, or no, York County. When I first moved to York County, I had filed for a PFA and I was granted the temporary order. And I got in front of Judge Prendergast, who's a woman, and she misunderstood the laws, I guess, because she basically said, well, the custody case is in Lebanon County right now. So we can't handle the PFA in York County. We have to send that over to Lebanon County. And we had that judge who, was completely biased towards father. So once he got it, he was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that again.
Wow. And are there any like fatherhood's rights initiatives or groups about pro fathers' rights in Pennsylvania? Because I know, like, for example, Connecticut has like the CFI, Connecticut Fatherhood Initiative, and there's actually like funding incentives to transfer custody to dads. So do you have any of those going on in your state that you know of?
I believe we do. I've been following, like I said, State Rep Jamie Flick, and I really support his cameras in the courtroom bill, but he seems to have a heavy focus on fathers' rights. So he had just made a post where apparently he had gotten together with several of those organizations in PA, and it seems to be heavily focused on, the pretending that court is so heavily biased against fathers. So we need to fix that.
Which is like that old school stereotype from like the 1950s where they say, oh, the wife gets everything in the divorce, that she gets the kid, she gets the house. Like that doesn't happen anymore. Like now, if anything, it's the opposite, where they're trying so hard to prove that they're not biased against dads, that they're being biased against moms now.
Right. And I think there's a bit of a game to it too. Like you were talking about earlier, there's a lot of funding involved and there's a lot of money to be made, for the court and for the lawyers that are involved. So it's I just lost my train of thought right in the middle of it.
Yeah. How much money would you say that you spent on lawyers total so far?
About 35,000.
That's insane. Like that's literally like a year's tuition of college that you could have paid for your children. Like instead you're wasting it, and you didn't even get anywhere until you got rid of the attorneys.
Right. I had a down payment for a home when my ex went to prison. We were planning to buy a home and get stable and live the rest of our lives peacefully. And I had to sink all of that money into attorneys and fighting this instead.
It's horrible. I'm so sorry, but you know what? Like you'll get money again, and you'll be able to build yourself back up. And this is just like torture, really, for everybody that has to go through it, whether you have sole custody or supervised visits or joint custody. Just dealing with it at all is like torture, because you're walking into these courts where the rules don't apply. It depends on the judge's mood. It depends on if they like you, if they like their lawyer. And it's just like anything goes, like a kangaroo court. And if you complain, they retaliate, lock you up, take your kids. Like it's insane. Like in my case, I reported sexual abuse of my daughter happening at dad's, and the judge was like, oh, you're lying. Now we're going to give dad sole custody, and you're going to be on supervised visits because you lied, and you have mental issues because you lied about the sexual abuse. But there was never any proper investigations. The person that was being accused was never arrested, never went through the process of, the court system. And it's like, it seems like when child abuse gets brought up, a lot of times they're saying like, unless you can prove that it happened, they won't even make an arrest, which is crazy because like you don't need beyond a reasonable doubt proof to make an arrest. You just need probable cause. And like throughout the whole process of the criminal justice system, it's supposed to be like having a trial where then the person who's the victim has the right to be heard as well as the defendant. But it's like, in a sexual assault case, like with your ex, like he was convicted of a criminal charge and sentenced. There was, I'm assuming a trial or the process of a trial. So it's like that whole thing, they had due process versus in my case, my daughter was the victim. She wasn't even given that at all. No due process for her. She's just like, nope, we don't believe you. That's it. Now you're going to go live with him. So it's just terrible. And, it's like, when somebody's 14, they're able to speak up for themselves versus somebody who's 3, 4. And then they say, oh, well, the parent must be coaching you. Oh, well, you must be just trying to get a leg up in the divorce, in the custody case, because you are just a spiteful ex. Like this is how they just paint people out to be. So then when there's real abuse, they don't believe it or they don't take it seriously. And so it's like, in your case, I think there's definitely some corruption with the judge and the lawyer, especially that the lawyer is handling both of the dad and grandpa. And do they have like a lot of money, like that they have like connections and stuff?
I don't think so. Grandfather's been complaining about money most of the case. Every time I was held in contempt, I was ordered to pay attorney's fees, but obviously that fell off with the appeal. But I'm honestly not sure where this money's coming from or how he's still going.
Sometimes people do each other a favor or they owe each other a favor. and, maybe they know somebody. Maybe he's got a friend that works at the court or something like that that you don't know about. Because it just seems like, they are super, super biased. But like you
Yeah,
said, even if you get one judge recused, the other ones are like similar.
right.
So,
It's like I don't you're not going to win. They'll make sure they box you in and keep you there. I don't The system is so crazy.
but I think that you're in a pretty good position, though, given the circumstances where, you're able to, at the moment, keep your kids safe. You have sole custody. If it came down to it, if you had to do something on an emergency basis to protect your children and yourself, whether it's relocating or whatever it is, you legally are able to do something like that versus if he had custody and you had to give them to him every weekend or something like that, they could try to hold you in contempt. But right now, you are safe, which is good. But, I think it's
Yeah.
important to just continue to reach out to the community. And, even if there's more victims and people that you can connect with, the more proof that you have that this is not just happening to you, but to many people in this county and your state, then the less they can say, oh, she's just a disgruntled litigant that's unhappy. She just doesn't like what the judge did. No. Then you prove that it's a pattern and that this is like, a serious, in a way, like they're trafficking kids into homes of abusers and stuff. So I think it's far more serious than anybody really understands right now. So the best that you can do is just stay safe and protect your kids and yourself, because nobody's going to try to protect them like you.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I will remain pro se, I think, for the rest of my experience in this court.
Yeah, and you're doing a good job. And do you ever like try to like give tips to other parents of that are like exploring being pro se, or try to, work together in groups with other parents? Or would you say if there's other people in PA that are listening that maybe can relate, that they should reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I post all the time on my personal Facebook, and I have a group called Empowered Pro Se. It's not specific to pro se parents that, anybody can join. We want that community there for everybody, but it's the spark behind it was my experience and ending up in a position where I was basically forced to go pro se. I didn't have any money, so I'm broken down, and just trying to figure it out in a position where, I have to learn it or drown.
Right.
So I want to be that person who can help other parents in that position, not have to go through the stress of learning it from scratch. So they have some
Absolutely.
direction.
Well, that's good. And it also, like, it's empowering too, like you said, that that you're not alone. Not only are you like
Mhm.
helping others, but you're getting evidence of what's going on and you're feeling like you're not by yourself and you're being supported. So, I'm assuming they don't live stream any of the proceedings.
No, unfortunately not. We usually have some like the allowance for Zoom, but it's only for the participants. So, like I said, I got that order earlier where I was blocked from having observers via Zoom, so they won't put anything out for the public. You would have to come to the court to watch my hearings.
I know that some people, I know like for myself in the past, like for under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you can get like accommodations under the ADA. And that's like one of the only things that they don't have immunity for. So if you have like any qualified disability, like PTSD, ADHD, like any physical, mental, emotional disability qualifies under federal law, and you're allowed to ask for ADA accommodations. And so, I know like some people like myself asked for Zoom hearings as an accommodation because with PTSD, sometimes it's more stressful coming in person, being there near your abuser and all this stuff. So, that's like a commonly granted accommodation. And also asking to have a support person at the hearing as an ADA accommodation. So if they grant Zoom hearings and they grant you a support person, then legally under federal law, they'd be obligated to allow you to have the court watchers and the Zoom hearing. So that's maybe something to explore. you know, because I know that it can be difficult. And I know one time I had a Zoom hearing and I posted on Facebook, like, everyone show my support today. Show me support. I have a Zoom hearing, whatever. And there was like 100 people watching and the court was like so scared. They were like panicked. The judge put us on a recess and then said they weren't coming back.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, there's really like power in like numbers. And when they see people are watching and people care about you, they're scared. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I'll look into that. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm trying to rally the community for this next hearing. I'm hoping to have people in person in both Lancaster and York counties to show them that like this case does have eyes on it and people are supporting and they want this corruption is about to be blown wide open.
And what's the date and time of the hearing, just in case everyone wants to come?
It's December 15th at 3:30 p.m. in the
And
York
that's
County Courthouse.
York County Courthouse. Okay. All right. Well, I really wish you the best of luck. And I think that you're on the right track. You've done a lot being pro se, and that's really admirable. So keep up the good work and keep doing what you got to do to protect your kids. And all of us will be rooting for you. And I want to thank you for your time and sharing your story and sharing it with us today.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me here.
No problem. Well, take care and best of luck.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.